It's time now for One More Thing. Kimberly, kick us
Hello.
off.
Thank you, Dana Perino, star of the Daily Briefing. All right. Well, most people who go to a Pink concert, well, they're dancing their little heinies off, singing along and really living in the moment. But if you are 6 years old, this time might be better spent with a little nap or two, as evidenced by Pink's beautiful little daughter, 6-year-old Willow. She's struggling to keep her eyes open during her mom's Dallas concert, nodding off, smiling as her dad, Carrie Hart, films her. So she shared the adorable video on social media. Pink did and said, "I really rock that show."
Looks like Juan when I'm talking.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I pay attention to you, Jesse.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you keep those on you, though. When you talk, it's like shock and awe.
Check it out. I agree.
All right, Wani.
All right, so you guys know I'm a newspaper reporter at heart. Well, take a look at this front page from the Chicago Sun-Times. That's right, it's blank. No news about the White House or the White Sox. The paper ran this bold front page to ask readers for their financial support, noting that news organizations that do original reporting now represent less than 3% of what you can find online in this country. And newspaper advertising, it's declining, taking money away from quality journalism. The situation is killing off papers all across the country. Denver especially comes to mind. Today is World Press Freedom Day. From me to you, love your local newspaper. Subscribe.
Yeah. That was racist.
Yeah.
What?
It was all white.
White paper.
Oh, my gosh.
Why couldn't it have been black, Juan? Jeez.
All right.
I'm out of here.
Oh,
My friend Ian Bremmer has a new book out. It is called Us Versus Them, The Failure of Globalism. And if you are a Trump supporter, I think you would want to check this book out. Even if you're not. It's a New York Times bestseller. He just made the list today.
I like him, too.
This is he was talking about on the show today about just the feeling going around the world. Watch.
Average people in the United States, like everyone I grew up with in the projects, feel like this country and the establishment no longer serves them. And that is true economically, it's true culturally, it's true in terms of our military, it's true in terms of technology. Those are deep, deep-seated things that are just not getting fixed. And we're not unique. It's the way they feel in Britain, it's the way they feel in Canada and in New Zealand.
Anyway, it's a great book. Check it out. Jesse.
Do you guys remember that game Jenga?
Love it.
Where you stack it and you try to pull the things out? Well, check out this shot. This is a golfer, Joshua Kelly. This is how he wins Jenga. Boom!
wow.
Chip shot into the middle of the Jenga tower.
Perfect.
Takes out the middle piece. Look at that. You know how hard that is to do? Anybody that's played golf knows
Is this a fake
that's
video?
impossible. It's a trick shot video. It's not fake news, Kimberly, but thanks for challenging my integrity.
Wow.
All right, Greg.
Wow.
Just your vetting.
right.
Just your vetting.
I know you've been waiting for this.
Yes.
It's time for Greg's Sleepy Cat News. All right, we go to Wisconsin. I think this is, let's check out this sleepy cat. We actually have a sleepy cat copter that goes around that finds sleepy cats and checks on them. Yep, he looks like he's asleep.
It's like Pink's daughter.
Yeah, there he is. He's been listening to Juan talk about Trump. He's out. There he goes.
I can't. He just
I thought
can't.
we had a better sleepy cat video, but that'll do for now.
It's on BuzzFeed, right?
Yeah, cats are always tired, and it's not like they do anything.
Have you ever
Cats
been
do
that
sleep
tired?
Get a job, cats. Then sleep.
I was that tired when I came back from that week away.
Yeah, you were
Had a
tired.
hard time. And then
Great.
your makeup chair.
I'm
all
out of here
fell asleep.
Friday.
Great story, Dana.
Thank you. I'd really like to try to help us so we can get through the time because we have a little extra time, but no more. Set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five. Special report up next with Shannon Bream tonight in for Bret. Hey, Shannon.
Great to see you, Dana. Thank you so much. Well, the president's personal attorney's calls monitored, plus that payment to a porn star. The newest member of the president's legal team admits the president repaid his attorney in the Stormy Daniels case. And 3 American citizens held hostage in North Korea could be headed home ahead of a possible meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Trump. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Shannon Bream in for Bret Baier. On a national day of prayer, a lot of drama was playing out as we learned President Trump's personal attorney was under surveillance. And the president's newest mouthpiece had a lot to say that may conflict with the president's own words about a payment to Stormy Daniels. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is following it all from the White House. Good evening, John.
Shannon, good evening to you. It was one of those we're not in Kansas moments anymore after months of denials that President Trump had anything to do with the payoff to Stormy Daniels. Came word today that, well, yes, he did. And then there was word that the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen, was under surveillance. It was the latest in a day of bombshells. A report that in the week leading up to the raid on Trump personal attorney Michael Cohen, Cohen was the subject of a federal wiretap that may have tracked a call from the White House.
I'm not sure when the last conversation took place, and I would refer you to the president's outside counsel about any concerns of wiretapping.
Neither the president's attorneys nor representatives for Michael Cohen could confirm the wiretap. But presidential lawyer Rudy Giuliani went off on the DOJ, saying, if true, anybody who says that I'm exaggerating when I say that this is an out-of-control investigation and they're acting like stormtroopers, give me a break, baby. They prove it every day. Giuliani blasted the possibility of a wiretap as a blatant transgression of attorney-client privilege, saying, I am waiting for the Attorney General to step in his role as defender of justice and put these people under investigation.
Can't possibly.
Last night, Giuliani threw a hand grenade into the Cohen investigation, telling Sean Hannity the president paid Cohen back for that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels.
So they funneled it through the law firm. Funneled through the law firm, and the president repaid it.
The stunning admission appeared to contradict previous statements, one from Michael Cohen in February who said, neither the Trump organization nor the Trump campaign reimbursed me for the payment either directly or indirectly. And another, April 5th, from the president aboard Air Force One.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
But Giuliani insists President Trump didn't know he was paying Cohen back for paying Stormy Daniels. The reimbursement, said Giuliani, was for expenses that Cohen did not itemize. And while Giuliani insisted the payment to Daniels He insists President Trump didn't know he was paying Cohen back for paying Stormy Daniels. The reimbursement, said Giuliani, was for
way they made this
Cohen
payment.
didn't even ask. Cohen made it go away. He did his job.
Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, was stunned by Giuliani's acknowledgement of the payoff.
Our case hours. I've been saying this all along. This is about a cover-up. It's about lies told the American people. It's about people trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, that citizens of this country.
The new revelations threw into chaos what was meant to be a day of faith at the White House. The president hosting religious leaders to celebrate the National Day of Prayer.
We are proud of our religious heritage, and as president, I will always protect religious liberty.
In that spirit, President Trump signed an executive order to establish the new White House Faith and Opportunity Initiative. The office will focus on protecting religious freedom.
The Faith Initiative will help design new policies that recognize the vital role of faith in our families, our communities, and our great country.
But at the same time President Trump was urging quiet reflection, his newly reconstituted legal team adopted a far more aggressive posture. After Rudy Giuliani referred to FBI agents who conducted the search on Michael Cohen as stormtroopers, James Comey tweeted, I know the New York FBI. There are no stormtroopers there, just a group of people devoted to the rule of law and the truth. Our country would be better off if our leaders tried to be like them rather than comparing them to Nazis. Giuliani's response to Comey? He's a sensitive little baby. Late this afternoon, sources told Fox News producer Jake Gibson that while Michael Cohen was under surveillance, his phones were not tapped and his calls were not recorded. Investigators used a device called a pen register to record the numbers of the calls that Cohen was making from his phone and log the duration of those calls. But those phone calls themselves, Shannon, were never listened to.
All right, John Roberts live for us at the White House. Thank you, John. For more on what all of this could mean for the president legally, we turn to Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. And Judge, maybe we put you in the category of those who don't totally believe the story on the pen register?
I don't believe the story on the pen register. On a day in which the president's chief lawyer just threw a bombshell into many of the president's defenses. Do you really think the Justice Department is going to admit that they listened to phone calls from the president? They may not have recorded, but I assure you they were listening. If they were listening, they can't use anything they hear as a basis for an affidavit of probable cause or in a prosecution, but it can send them seeking other means to obtain evidence to support that.
Yeah, basically called parallel reconstruction. You find something you weren't supposed to have access to, so you find a different way to get access to it.
A different and lawful way to get access to it so that you can present it to a court. When Michael Cohen asked that the documents seized by the FBI be returned, the government said there's no privilege here because of the crime fraud exception. That means they had enough information from those phone calls to suggest that Michael Cohen or his client were participating in a crime or a fraud and were masking the phone calls as attorney-client privilege, and they weren't.
Okay, let's talk through now the potential legal ramifications of what Rudy Giuliani revealed last night.
Right.
He says he's discussed it with the president. Here's what the president tweeted out today. We'll walk through this. Mr. Cohen, that's his attorney, an attorney received a monthly retainer not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into through reimbursement a private contract between two parties known as a non-disclosure or NDA. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth. In this case, it is in full force and effect and will be used in arbitration for damages against Ms. Clifford Daniels. The agreement was used to stop the false and extortionist accusations made by her about an affair, despite already having signed a detailed letter admitting there was no affair. Prior to its violation by Ms. Clifford and her attorney, this was a private agreement. Money from the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction. So now we get to the question of how this money was allegedly repaid to Michael Cohen. Is there a potential for a fraud charge in there?
There is a potential for a fraud charge here because one of the reasons that President Trump was able to say he knew nothing about the agreement is his name doesn't appear in there, and he didn't sign it. Michael Cohen and Ms. Daniels' then lawyer, not her current lawyer, used a pseudonym, David Dennison, in place of Donald Trump. So the question is it even a valid agreement since the person who it purportedly binds, the president, didn't actually sign it? The president is correct when he says that non-disclosure agreements are common with respect to celebrities. A lot of celebrities compel everybody that works for them to sign non-disclosure agreements because they may see something that they don't want disclosed. But it would be a violation of legal ethics if Michael Cohen paid a settlement in a case out of the retainer, which was intended for his own fees and his own expenses. It's also, to me, inconceivable that Donald Trump, who was notoriously aware of where every dollar he has is going, was not aware that $130,000 was going to Stormy Daniels.
Well, conceivable as he has said here, it appears, and what Rudy Giuliani said too. Listen, wealthy, busy people don't always know what's being fixed or taken care of on their behalf. They've authorized someone to do it. They just do it. They don't have to get involved with the details.
That may very well be the case, and there may have been a method to Rudy Giuliani's mentioning this last night. Knowing Rudy's mind, as I think I do, I've known him for 25 years, he likes to focus on discrete legal issues. So he wanted to take the Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen issue off the table. I don't know if he succeeded by what he said last night, because I don't know that the White House and the president, and certainly Mr. Cohen, were prepared for this. Remember, he's not Michael Cohen's lawyer. Cohen today seemed stunned by what he heard last night, but this is off the plate, it appears, in the Mueller investigation or the Southern District investigation with respect to the president.
Quickly, Stormy Daniels' attorney currently, Michael Avenatti, who doesn't miss the chance to weigh in on the case, said he believes that Cohen will be indicted on several serious criminal charges, and he's continuing to predict. He says the president doesn't make it through his first term because of legal issues.
Well, I don't know about the president not making it through his first term. It depends on what Bob Mueller comes up with. I happen to think that the Mueller investigation is a very serious one, and they have accumulated a lot of evidence that Rudy Giuliani and the president don't want to confront. And I don't know where Michael Cohen gets this, Michael Avenatti gets this from, except that the Los Angeles Federal District Court judge, before whom the Stormy Daniels versus Donald Trump case is assigned, stayed the case for 90 days, quote, until Michael Cohen is indicted. I don't know if he knows something that the rest of us don't know, or this is just a neutral judicial mind looking at the facts saying there's going to be an indictment here.
With that discussion of Cohen taking the fifth as well. All right, Judge, always great to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. All right, President Trump's threat to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal isn't sitting well with Tehran. Iran's foreign minister posted a YouTube video today saying Iran will not, quote, renegotiate or add on to the 2015 deal. Mohammad Zarif's video comes just days before the May 12th deadline for President Trump to recertify the deal, and shortly after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out what he called evidence that the country has been cheating on the accord. Well, 3 American citizens held hostage in North Korea could soon be on their way home. At this hour, the Trump administration won't say anything more than it would be a sign of goodwill by North Korea ahead of a possible sit-down between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reports tonight on what's at stake.
There is a flurry of talk, at least, about the possible freeing of 3 American citizens held by North Korea. President Trump tweeting overnight, as everybody is aware, the past administration has long been asking for 3 hostages to be released from a North Korean labor camp, but to no avail. Stay tuned. He was referring to Korean Americans Kim Dong-chol, a businessman detained in 2015, and Kim Hak-song and Kim Sang-duk, who were actually seized by authorities last year and had worked at a Christian-backed Pyongyang university. There were reports the prisoners accused of anti-government activity were on the move. Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani sped up the timeline.
This is the President of the United States. He's getting ready to negotiate probably one of our most historic agreements since the opening to China. We got Kim Jong-un impressed enough to be releasing 3 prisoners today.
In fact, some work still needs to be done to gain their release, a senior White House official later told Fox News, underscoring the urgency, the tragic tale of university student Otto Warmbier, detained by the North in 2016, who died following his release last year.
There is no indication that they've been tortured to the degree that Otto was, where he was brought to within an inch of his life and then ultimately died back in the United States.
All of this following last week's summit at the DMZ between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in, and before the planned summit involving Kim and President Trump. The release of the Americans is seen by analysts as a confidence builder for that summit. Mike Pompeo now leading preparations as Secretary of State, and Vice President Pence canceling today a Latin America trip to focus on the meeting.
The president feels like stopping a nuclear war and helping protect the safety and security of people across the globe would certainly be the #1 priority of the President of the United States.
The Trump-Kim summit is expected to happen late this month or maybe early in June. Administration officials are hoping those American detainees will be home by then. Shannon.
Greg, thank you very much. Well, the woman picked to lead the CIA could find herself confirmed in one of the closest votes yet, as questions are raised about her involvement in interrogation some critics call torture. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Harrods with a closer look tonight at Gina Haspel.
They'll be happy with our Gina, who's here today.
The very public endorsement from President Trump appears to be part of a coordinated push by the White House in advance of next week's Senate confirmation hearing, where Gina Haspel may become the first woman to lead the spy agency. More than 50 former intelligence officials support the nominee, including 47-year CIA veteran Charlie Allen, who first worked with Haspel on 9/11.
She has 33 years of experience in the clandestine world. She's has 7 overseas tours. She is a gifted linguist, and she understands that we have mounting dangers.
But critics say her role in the CIA's enhanced interrogation program that opponents call torture disqualifies her. In a conference call Wednesday, White House officials said the votes appear to be 50 in favor and 49 against, with wildcard Senator John McCain still in Arizona for cancer treatment.
I am hopeful that people will look at the merits of her candidacy, but I still would expect at the end of the day it'll be a close vote.
To get Haspel's confirmation through, the CIA declassified limited records about the controversial detainee interrogation program, which included waterboarding 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. This 2011 memo concluded Haspel acted appropriately and did not order the destruction of interrogation videos. Allen has firsthand knowledge, working side by side with then-director George Tenet.
I was at that table. George Tenet was at that table. Gina Haspel was down at headquarters, but she had no authority to do that. She did not make any of those decisions.
The Senate has never confirmed somebody with an operational role in the use of torture. This would be a new low.
The ACLU's Chris Anders, along with senior Senate Democrats, say the CIA should declassify more records so the public can independently assess Haspel's career and character before the confirmation vote.
Was she involved in the rendition program, which was the kidnapping program? Was she part of the decision to kill and execute an American citizen by use of drones?
Critical vote may be cast by Senator Rand Paul, whose spokesman told Fox News tonight the senator has not met with Haspel. It's not clear they will meet before next week's public confirmation hearing. The spokesman said the senator remains concerned about Haspel's ties to the controversial Bush-era interrogation program. Shannon.
That's a critical meeting. Catherine Herridge, thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, up next, an interview with a former jihadist who radicalized killers. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 10 in Phoenix, where organizers of an Arizona teacher strike are ending their walkout after raises pass in the budget. Governor Doug Ducey signed off on the plan that provides more than $300 million in raises for many of the state's striking teachers. The budget package also provides a partial restoration of recession-era cuts to schools. The action comes after a week-long strike that shut down schools all across the state. Fox 61 in Connecticut, where one person is dead, 9 officers injured following a domestic violence call that led to a standoff and explosion in North Haven. The person killed has not yet been identified. The officers are being treated for minor injuries. And this is a live look at Santa Monica Pier in California from Fox 11. One of the big stories there tonight, the first reported death in connection with a nationwide E. coli outbreak due to romaine lettuce. The CDC says the death was reported in California. More than 100 people in 25 states have reported illnesses due to the tainted lettuce. That is tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. Twitter's urging you to change your password after a glitch exposed some of them. The social network with more than 330 million users says it happened on its internal computer network and has found no indication that passwords were stolen or misused, but suggests you change yours out of an abundance of caution. The Dow finished ahead 5 points after being down nearly 400 earlier in the day. The S&P 500 lost 6. NASDAQ dropped 13. For more on the markets and the first round of trade talk between the U.S. and China, we turn to Deirdre Bolton of Fox Business Network, joining us live from New York. Good evening, Deirdre.
Good evening, Shannon. Representatives from the world's 2 biggest economies have their work cut out for them. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin leading the U.S. delegation, and Harvard-educated Chinese Vice Premier He is leading the Chinese. So China and the U.S. are so far apart on significant issues, it is going to take more than 48 hours to find solutions. Trade experts say the most positive outcome would be an agreement to keep negotiating. One of the biggest complaints in the American business community is alleged Chinese intellectual property theft. Some estimates show that China is stealing at least $50 billion a year worth of American tech. American business leaders say when they want access to China, they get a license with conditions. They say Chinese government mandates that local Chinese firms be part of the tech setup, and from that point on, it's easy to hack or take valuable information. American business leaders also cite an unlevel playing field, with the Chinese government subsidizing competing local companies. The Chinese government categorically denies this practice, for the record. But to show you the rift in perception, one Chinese official said it's unreasonable for China to produce the world's T-shirts and to let Americans have all the high tech. Both countries are talking tough. Both are preparing for a potential trade war. Bloomberg is reporting that China has essentially stopped buying American soybeans. China usually imports more than $12 billion per year from the U.S. and has apparently advised growers in its northern Farm Belt region to plant more soy. China has also reached out to Brazil and Argentina, other soybean exporters, to take the place of some American supplies. Now, for its part, the U.S. is slow-walking potential Chinese purchases of U.S. companies, and then in other cases is outright blocking investment in the U.S. And just this week, the Trump administration said it may restrict 2 Chinese telecom equipment makers, Huawei and ZTE, from selling equipment at all in the U.S. So lots of work left to do. Shannon, back to you.
Just a beginning. All right, Deirdre, thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, just minutes ago, House Speaker Paul Ryan sent a statement out that he will allow the House chaplain to remain on the job. The move comes after Reverend Patrick Conroy sent a biting letter to the House Speaker accusing a top Ryan aide of telling him that maybe it's time the House had a chaplain that wasn't Catholic, a charge that aide strongly denies. Ryan forced Conroy to tender his resignation last month, saying he was dissatisfied with Conroy's pastoral care to lawmakers. Ryan now says he plans to sit down with the Reverend next week so they can move forward for the good of the House. Tonight, a Fox News first, as one of the men who inspired the brothers who carried out one of France's most dramatic terrorist attacks tells the story of his own descent into extremism and gives rare and chilling insight into the cold-blooded killers who gunned down 2 police officers and 10 journalists at Charlie Hebdo in 2015. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Amy Kellogg has that story.
It was out of guilt and repentance that one of France's most notorious jihadist recruiters joined forces with one of its premier de-radicalization specialists. Farid Benyatou was a preacher who sent the Charlie Hebdo killers on their path to jihad.
It was more than friendship, it was complicity.
At 15, Benyatou found radical Islam and soon developed a substantial following, encouraging jihadists to go fight in Iraq. Benyatou was especially close to the younger of the 2 terrorist brothers, Sharif Kouachi. The 32-year-old Kouachi was arrested before he made it to Iraq and ultimately turned his hatred on France.
I encouraged him at a time to go to Iraq. When he had doubts, he came to see me, and I would dispel those doubts.
But both men wound up in prison. While Kouachi's views hardened there, the company Benyatou kept actually helped him to de-radicalize.
The simple act of building relations with other people opened my mind. The other thing that really helped me was the assistance of my Jewish neighbors. When I got out of jail, they knew I had been in prison and why I had been in prison, but they opened their door to me.
Once released from prison in 2009, Benyatou claims he tried but failed to de-radicalize Kouachi. Now even more extreme, Kouachi reportedly went to Yemen to get weapons training and started to follow American-born cleric Anwar al-Awlaki. De-radicalization expert Dunya Bouzar says that even though Benyatou was not able to stop the Kouachi brothers, those like him who have been down the extremist path can be powerful examples for those under the influence of jihadist groups. Though ISIS has lost its territory, she says its recruiters have not let up, targeting young people who know very little about Islam, and the way they target young people is efficient.
ISIS looks into the profile of each young person and adapts its jihadist ideology according to the psychological profile of each. It touches everyone.
Benyatou still takes some responsibility for France's first major terror attack of the millennium.
It is I who instilled in him the ideology. I participated in some way.
There are some estimates that 19,000 people in France have radicalized, 2,000 of whom are considered extremely dangerous. So it really is a race against time, Shannon.
Amy Kellogg, thank you very much. Coming up, a fierce fight between Republicans hoping to pick up a Senate seat in Indiana. The city of Seattle has a plan to combat homelessness, but critics say it could come at a cost to actual jobs. And one of the city's largest private employers is fighting back. Correspondent Dan Springer reports from Washington tonight on whether attacks to clean up the city could actually clean out job growth.
The city of Seattle, with its booming tech industry, is poised to lower the boom on its largest job creators. The council is considering a head tax of 26 cents for every hour worked in the city on companies that gross $20 million a year.
And some businesses will die or leave Seattle because of this.
The tax will raise $75 million from around 600 companies, among them Home Street Bank, which has 700 employees in Seattle, but owns land just across the city line.
And you start creating a scenario where it's much more attractive to house employees outside the city. And that is bad for the city. It's bad for jobs. It's bad for the city economy.
The tax revenue would be used to build homeless shelters, tiny house villages, and affordable apartments. Despite spending on homelessness that has ballooned to $200 million a year, the number of those on the streets or in cars has grown 20% in 2 years to nearly 4,000.
Housing and homelessness is absolutely a regional crisis, but we have to act with urgency right here in Seattle to get folks inside. This creates almost around 2,000 deeply affordable homes.
By far the biggest impact will be felt by Amazon. It's looking at an annual tax of $540 on each of its 40,000 employees. The online retailer will pay $21.6 million more a year, even though it's spending $10 million to build a homeless shelter in one of its many new office towers. And at the same time, Amazon is looking for a second headquarters.
What Amazon is doing is keeping their options open. They're saying they're going to set up a headquarters in another city, and then they can transfer work from Seattle to other places as needed, and it's just a basic business decision.
After months of being silent, Amazon has finally fired a warning shot, confirming that it has put on hold plans to build an office tower in this block and is considering subleasing a different building it owns if the city goes ahead and passes this head tax. It would be about 7,000 jobs not created. Shannon?
All right, Dan Springer, thank you very much from Seattle. We're getting our first look at what Las Vegas SWAT officers saw as they stormed their way into a Mandalay Bay hotel room aiming to stop the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Stephen Paddock was already dead when they entered the room. The body cam videos show him lying on his back as officers searched the room. One officer even seen grabbing an assault-style rifle from the ledge of a broken window. 58 people died in the October 1st shooting. Well, one of the best chances for Republicans to expand their slim majority in the Senate could come out of America's heartland. But the GOP primary in Indiana is anything but full of hearts, as the candidates spend millions on attack ads in one of the nation's nastiest primaries. Senior correspondent Mike Tobin reports tonight on all the mudslinging from Indianapolis.
Good to see everybody.
The Indiana GOP primary is shaping up as the most expensive in the nation, and it is loaded with petty insults.
Todd the Fraud, Luke the Loon, the Swamp Brothers.
Nice to meet you. I'm running for the U.S. Senate.
Congressman Luke Messer, Congressman Todd Rokita, and businessman Mike Braun, a former state representative who campaigns as an outsider, all brand themselves as closest to the president.
That's why I back the Trump agenda in Congress. I'm a pro-life, pro-Second Amendment conservative who supports President Trump.
I was working with the president to get him elected against crooked Hillary Clinton. Luke Messer was on the Clinton News Network, otherwise known as CNN, disparaging the president.
The president carried the Hoosier state by 19 points in 2016. Therefore, the incumbent Democrat Senator Joe Donnelly may be vulnerable. The seat could be a valuable pickup for the Grand Old Party in November. However, Democrats say with the nasty campaign, the Republicans are doing their opposition research for them.
And Mike Braun, this Democrat raised our taxes 45 times.
Watchers suggest Republicans have done so much damage to each other, this right-leaning state is now a toss-up.
Whoever the nominee is should beat Donnelly. That's why it was troubling for the two of them when in the only public poll they were way off.
All that is certain is the White House sees Indiana as a place Republicans could gain some ground in the Senate.
The political wing of the White House is, I think, looking at this as the most important race in the country.
A White House official tells Fox News Senator Donnelly is targeted as one of several red state Democrat obstructionists. Just 2 days after the primary, President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence are coming to South Bend, Indiana, to trumpet their own accomplishments and to boost whichever Republican emerges from this race. Shannon?
Albeit battered and bruised, Mike Tobin, thank you very much. Up next, surveillance, payments, and much more. We're breaking down all the big news surrounding President Trump with our panel. First, beyond our borders tonight, Saudi Arabian security officials confirmed today the arrival of Guantanamo Bay prisoner Ahmed Mohammed al-Darbi. They say al-Darbi arrived just before midnight and that his relatives had been notified. Pentagon officials announced the transfer Wednesday, saying al-Darbi will serve out the remainder of his 13-year sentence there. So far, there have been about 140 detainees transferred from Guantanamo Bay to Saudi Arabia. This was the first under the Trump administration. Strikes rolled on today in France, affecting commuters in that country. French rail workers set up street protests as they resumed their strike against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to revamp employee benefits. This is Air France crews spent a 12th day striking over pay. About 15% of flights were canceled Thursday. The International Monetary Fund has censured Venezuela for failing to share updated numbers on its troubled economy. The action has no immediate penalties, but could end with Venezuela being ousted from the coalition of nations created to promote economic stability. Venezuela's central bank hasn't published official economic figures since 2004. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We will be right back.
That money was not campaign money. Sorry, I'm giving you a fact now that you don't know. It's not campaign money. No campaign finance violation. Funneled through law firm, and the president repaid it.
Oh, I didn't know he did. Yeah. There's no campaign finance law.
Zero.
This was information that the president didn't know at the time, but eventually learned. The president has denied and continues to deny the underlying claim. We give the very best information that we have at the time.
Mr. President, you and your advisors and your lawyers need to bring it. Bring it. Because you continue to lie to the American people, and we are not going to tolerate it. Not today, not tonight, and any other day.
All right, let's bring in our panel. A lot to talk about there. Tom Rogan, commentary writer for The Washington Examiner. Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. And Charles Hurt, opinion editor for The Washington Times. All right, Rudy is one of the newest members of the legal team, and he is out there talking. Yes. A lot, Charlie.
Yes, he is out there talking. And, you know, I do think it's important that, you know, a lot of people are speculating about whether he went too far, whether he got over his skis last night with Sean Hannity. But at the end of the day, I think he wanted to accomplish two things, and he did accomplish those two things. One is he wanted to go ahead and set the marker that, in fact, Donald Trump himself did pay the money that went to for the NDA agreement. And the second thing that he wanted to accomplish was he wanted to put out there that the president did it for personal reasons, not for the campaign. He kind of stepped on that a little bit this morning on Fox and Friends, where it seemed to sort of, he seemed to walk that back a little bit. But he wanted to accomplish those two things. He did, and because he did that, I think the president is in a lot better, is in a stronger situation because of that now than he was when there were questions about who paid for it.
Well, and Chuck, was this a cleanup to this issue of potential campaign violations dealing with the FEC? If the president tackles this way, if Rudy Giuliani says he did pay it, this is how it worked, does it put out that fire for the Trump campaign?
I don't think so. I think this started a whole bunch of new fires. This is like antics that are going on around what is actually a pretty serious issue. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was about a month ago, on Air Force One, the president flatly denied knowing anything about this payment, which created a situation in which there were two alternatives. One, he was lying, or two, some other benefactor. He was in the thrall of some benefactor who was paying hush money to his alleged former mistress. Well, now we know he was lying. So if that's sort of the best case scenario for him, that's not a good case. The campaign finance thing is only the beginning of the trouble, because there's going to be a whole inquiry now by the Southern District of New York's U.S. attorney into this chain of payment that was funneled through his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, and whether there was any fraud going on in that in terms of what he represented to the banks and so forth. I don't think anything's been cleaned up.
Okay, so Tom, a lot of this, it seems, would go back to a timeline of when the president did know, when he did get involved with payments. They've been very careful in their language. It's possible that they've been telling the truth, but parsing the words very carefully to this point. Whether the American people feel like it's wrong or that they feel like they've been lied to by the president, that's a different question altogether about whether he did something legally wrong.
Right, but I think that notion of the American people is what we're going at here, or at least what the Trump administration is trying to do through Giuliani. I think they sense Mueller closing in some way, whether that be through Cohen, whether it be through collusion, whatever. And so for them, the best thing to do is to fight this fight in the political domain rather than the legal domain. They know as much as the law is supposed to be blind, ultimately, because this is the President of the United States and he's special counsel, if the President can get out ahead of this and push this into that public atmosphere, I think they think that Robert Mueller perhaps will be more amenable to negotiating or to backing off. I'm not sure if that's a good gamble, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
Well, and to this PR point, a lot of back and forth between Rudy Giuliani and former FBI Director James Comey, of course fired by the President today, about whether people are acting like stormtroopers or not. Comey says, you know, he bats that down and says stop using those words, and Giuliani says, well, stop acting like it. Where do we go, Chuck?
Well, again, you know, I try to be a political analyst, and yet this is kind of like almost, I would use the word antics. It's just this kind of fracas that's going on between these formerly very substantial people in our political system, like the former mayor of New York and the former director of the FBI. No, I wouldn't say that Rudy Giuliani chose the wisest, most adequate term when he called a bunch of FBI agents stormtroopers. And furthermore, you know, they were there with a search warrant. They didn't barge in like the Gestapo or something like that. That's just something people have got to stop saying.
The fact that they felt like not only Cohen-Ray, but the Manafort, for example, was very heavy-handed, the way that it was carried out and the way that things were executed.
Stronger case with respect to Manafort, I'll give you that one. You know, the handcuffs and all that stuff, or whatever the tactics were. The no-knock raid, sorry. But, you know, they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's with respect to Michael Cohen. I agree it's controversial to go into a lawyer's office, but they, so far as we know, are following procedure. So basically what Rudy Giuliani is engaged in is just, you know, he's working the refs, as Tom said, and he's just trying to spin and shake the narrative.
Sometimes that is necessary in sporting events.
Yes.
But to this point today that Cohen was wiretapped, NBC later corrected their reporting. Our reporting has been that there was this pen register where they log phone calls when they go in, when they go out, how long they are. You know, Judge Napolitano sat here at the beginning of the show saying, Charlie, he doesn't think that they did not listen. He doesn't think they could have resisted that temptation, and they probably did listen to phone calls.
And whether they did or not, these are huge constitutional issues. Who authorized such a thing? You're talking about the President of the United States. You're talking about his personal attorney. And I do think that, you know, maybe the President hasn't been fully forthcoming about the Stormy Daniels thing at every step of the way. But, you know, not being fully forthcoming to people, to the American people, is not a crime. That's not a violation. And when you look at the charges that the president colluded with Russia to jilt an American election, those are the charges that Mueller is going after. And then to come around to this nonsense about the Stormy Daniels NDA payment, where it went and who, all this stuff, it's almost like going after Al Capone for his income taxes evasion. This has nothing to do with the serious crimes, the serious charges that were leveled against the president. And it's like, well, now, you know, the prosecutor needs some kind of scalp on his wall, so we're going to come up with some cocked up version of some nonsense. And I have a real problem with that.
Well, and what we've seen officially so far, no evidence of collusion as we now await the Mueller investigation. Although, you know, one of the witnesses who was interviewed yesterday said, if you think that's off the table, you're not paying attention. More on that coming up. Next up, the controversy over the president's CIA nominee.
We're seeing widespread support from across the political spectrum and within the intelligence community.
Her past association with so-called extraordinary interrogation techniques actually make her stalwart to resist it in the future.
Her support among her peers, her subordinate superiors, is absolutely universal.
For the last 15 months, Mike served as our nation and served our nation as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, where I can tell you they have such respect for him. They may be the only people that are not very happy right now, but they'll be happy. They'll be happy with our Gina.
We are back with our panel now to talk about the upcoming nomination confirmation vote on potential CIA director, Gina Haspel. Tom, you wrote a piece on her and about why she is so well respected here and abroad as well.
Yeah, she is. I mean, she has served 2 tours in London as the station chief there. It was a big liaison thing, but it actually has a lot of active operational stuff across Europe as well. Very popular with the British. In the piece, I sort of explained that perhaps she wasn't earlier on in her career. But operatively, she is popular abroad with allies. She is known for being very robust and very creative in terms of counter-Russian activities, which potentially could consolidate. I expect she will be saying a lot of that at the hearing to Democrats. Listen, if you want someone who's tough on Russia, I'm your gal. But in terms of the ultimate factor here, the White House hasn't been pushing as much for her as they were for Pompeo. Perhaps they used that chit up with Rand Paul already, and if you don't have the votes, you know, that's the key. So it's going to be a very close call, I think.
Yeah, speaking of Senator Rand Paul, here is his take as they await the vote.
The joyful glee at someone who's being tortured.
I find it just amazing that anyone would consider having this woman at the head of the CIA.
Rand Paul doesn't always make the right decisions right away, but we hope he gets there.
Well, and Chuck, you know, the president has said, just with so many recent votes, we can count on him. I know that he always comes through for me. In the end, there's a lot of pressure on him, but he hasn't even met with her yet, unless that's changed today.
Well, it's a kind of a core issue for someone like Rand Paul, who is so much of a libertarian and so committed to the Fourth Amendment and that whole doctrine, and who opposed many of these wars. So if he does come around, it will be because he's been persuaded to look the other way and away on his principles. However, this does just bring attention back to the importance of this hearing, because he's on the Republican side, but a lot of Democrats want to hear from Gina Haspel herself. What did you do? Why did you do it? How do you think about that special interrogation program in hindsight? How committed can you be to us never to do anything like that again? By the way, it's been banned by statute at this point in a way. And so, you know, I think inside the agency and the intelligence community, it's obvious there's a lot of respect for her, and in some ways she's ideal because the Directorate of Operations would have a veteran there in charge. But they don't get to make this decision. This is for the people's representatives. And I think on the last point I would make is that I think this would be a less of a close call if there weren't such partisanship over all nominations now. And Democrats, she would probably be getting more Democratic support up front than she is.
Yeah, and on that point, Mark Short from over at the White House had this to say about that upcoming vote.
We hope that there are enough Democrats that are courageous enough to look at somebody's qualifications and what they think is in the best interest of the nation, and put that as a priority in their criteria for casting a vote.
Charlie, do you think they will get enough numbers together?
I don't know. I mean, it's surprisingly acrimonious, but you know, as Chuck said, largely because of the partisanship to be, you know, about everything today. But it's, you know, it's amazing. You know, this is the first person nominated to the CIA, to head the CIA in decades who's not a political person. First woman. Of course, that's also the problem with her because of her experience as working in the CIA. But you have somebody like James Clapper talking about how, you know, who's no supporter of the Trump administration, saying that she would be a very good, you know, she would be the best at resisting those sorts of techniques going forward. I think it's going to wind up being a big political game where the White House tries to point out that here the president is dealing with things like North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, and we're having this squabble over here, and I think that they're hoping that they can win the big picture political fight.
Well, of course, one little wrinkle in this, John McCain is very ill. He may or may not be able even to vote on this, but that reduces the number of potential Republican votes. And even if he could vote, because of his strong, or even if he does vote, because of his strong views on torture, he's by no means an automatic for the administration.
Yeah, and quickly, Tom, earlier this week, former Secretary of State Condi Rice out there defending her, saying it's tough for people who weren't in our shoes in 9/11, after 9/11, to make these kinds of calls.
It is, and one of the things that you do hear a lot of CIA people across is the woman factor, breaking the glass ceiling. A lot of CIA people I've talked to say that, especially when it is so important to them that she has this potential.
Well, we'll see. We'll see who gets on board and whether she gets that meeting with Senator Rand Paul before they get to a vote. All right, when we come back, an incredible moment for a man who went from prison to the White House Rose Garden.